Make sure you guys hit the subscribe button if you guys are enjoying the content that we're throwing up. And make sure you guys hit the like button if you enjoy the video. And yeah, let's begin. Okay, so we are covering the conclusion to Spawn Armageddon. This is the very last thing. And here's my question for you guys. Those of you guys who are really knowledgeable about Spawn, where should we go from here? You guys were the ones who told me to cover Spawn Armageddon, and you guys proved to be right. So I'm deferring to you guys again. Where do we jump to after this? What do you think that we should cover? But in any event, with the main Armageddon battle having happened, right? The end of God and Satan and that kind of a thing, them doing, whatever the case is. One of the things to understand now is that we are basically on an alternate Earth. Is really kind of how this works, right? It's not really the recreated Earth. Earth as it originally existed has been essentially devoid of all life. It's been destroyed, and God and Satan are fighting on that world forevermore. At this point, what we do is we switch to kind of this new Earth that's being created by Spawn, and Al Simmons trying to return home. Now, if you guys recall in the last video, initially the Mother of Creation tried to stop him, but Al Simmons blew the Mother of Creation off and just kind of continued towards the house, at which point Al Simmons is stopped dead in his tracks. And the reason why is because the Mother of Creation basically says there's something that you have to see, and before you go in here, before you reveal yourself to them, there's something that you need to know. And so what the Mother of Creation does is kind of remove Spawn from his physical form and give him somewhat of like an astral form. But the initial kind of conversation going on between the Simmons family, with Terry, Granny, with Cyan, with Wanda, is they're really kind of recovering from everything. Right now, remember, a lot of what happened, Wanda and Terry don't really recall. Granny remembers all of it, right? Because she died and she went to heaven and then found out that God wasn't really God as she believed him to be, and all that kind of stuff. If you guys want to get caught up, make sure you check the description for the playlist of Spawn to get all the stuff, right? We're like 5 videos in there, so it's not super complex or anything. A good way to kind of cope with the quarantine. But nonetheless, for Cyan, she remembers a great deal of it. And it's one of these things where she basically says, I don't want to refer to Spawn or to Al Simmons as the sad man anymore. I'm going to call him Al because that's his name. And so it's kind of a cool thing because Granny kind of talks about what's going on, and it's kind of, from Wanda and Terry, they're just kind of like, okay, you need to go to sleep, that kind of a thing. It's not really dismissive so much as just kind of the belief that like Granny's off her rocker. And then you start to get into the meat and potatoes and the worst thing that Spawn ever did. And what this does is it initially picks up with Terry and Wanda going into the bedroom, and then of course Wanda initially tries to kind of initiate sexy time, and Terry's not really receptive to it. And the reason why is because, or I guess really it's one of these things where their romantic life, their love life is almost non-existent. And the reason for this is because Terry has like a lot of issues that he's struggling with at the moment. One of the things we kind of find out here is that with Al Simmons' return, Terry's been struggling with this, right? Because it's not enough that Al Simmons came back. Al Simmons came back and then basically saved all of existence, right? So it's like if you were dating a girl and then she was like, well, me and my ex broke up, and then you meet her ex and her ex turns out to be Superman, right? Like that's kind of what this is to a degree. and Terry is in a lot of ways kind of feeling emasculated by that. This is also compounded by the fact that when he sort of lashes out, Wanda's response is, I love you with all my heart. That's never going to go away. I'm always going to love Al Simmons because he was the man that I was married to, but you're who I'm with now. Suddenly we find out that what Terry's been doing has been snooping. And essentially Wanda has kind of kept this box of artifacts, this kind of box of things that belong to Al Simmons, right? Pictures, love letters, different things like that. And she looks at them almost every single day. She kind of kisses them and almost seems, this from Terry's perspective, she misses Al Simmons so much and can't really let go. And so the way that Terry sees this is really from the perspective of Wanda is still in love with Al Simmons, and that if Al Simmons comes back right now, immediately Terry's going to get the boot, right? And he even goes as far as to say, you've been a great friend, you helped me through some tough times, but you got to go because my man's back. That's kind of how he views all of this. And this is when we get the beans spilled on everything, because when Wanda learns that Terry was snooping, she's like, so what are you going to do next? Are you going to hit me? And his response is, God, no, why would I ever do that? And she said, because Al Simmons did. And that's when you really learn the truth of what Al Simmons, that's not the worst thing he did, right? But that's when you learn the truth about Al Simmons. When we look at the character of Spawn, we always saw him as just a guy who was married to a great woman and he potentially had a great life, and then he was betrayed by his friend Jason Wynn, his boss Jason Wynn, and then ended up becoming a hellspawn, and he could just never go back home, right? He seemed like a character who was in a tragic situation, a great guy in an incredibly tragic scenario. It is anything but that. What we end up learning is the first time that Al Simmons hit Wanda was when they were at a party. They had both been drinking. They came back, and Al Simmons just always kind of had this thing for his boss, right? He always looked up to Jason Wynn. He always idolized him. And when Wanda wanted to initiate an intimate moment when she wanted to have sex, Al Simmons just kind of said, no, I'm not really interested in that. And then she said, well, then let's get your boss and then we can do a threesome and maybe that'll get some wood in your pecker, right? And where she was joking, he lashes out and hits her. Following that, it happened at different points in time and for different reasons, right? Sometimes he choked her, sometimes he backhanded her, sometimes he hit her with a closed fist. And it was one of these things where she goes as far as to say she never really understood why, you know, how it is that like women in abusive relationships don't just leave, right? Like, why don't they just walk away? What's so hard about that? Like, your man hits you, you leave? It's not rocket science. And that's how she viewed it, right? Like, how come I can't do that? The reality was she was in love with him, you know? And if you really look into the psychology of that, there's a lot of women who give a lot of different reasons for why that happens, right? They feel like they can't do anything on their own. Like they've kind of been made to feel like they're inferior. They can't live without that person, whatever the case happens to be. But there's a lot of psychological effects that go into abusive relationships. And that's one of the things that happened here. Al Simmons would buy her like a puppy or something along those lines. But the reality of this is that Wanda looked at Al and realized that she was second best, that the love of his life was war. It was conflict. It was fighting things and killing people. That's the way it was, right? That's the thing that he cared about the most. And when she initially sat down and started having this conversation with him, you know, when she's talking to Terry, one of the things she says is there was a point where she became pregnant. And Al Simmons, watching all this go down, didn't know, right? He had no idea that Wanda was pregnant. And essentially, you know, it's kind of like we tried so many times, it wasn't really possible, that Wanda had essentially gone off the pill. She had been on birth control all this time and Al Simmons didn't know. And so finally she goes off birth control and then basically decides, I want to get pregnant with this guy, right? And so following that, what this does is it turns into a thing where she starts talking to him about that. I went off the pill, I'm pregnant now, you know, that kind of a thing. And initially he's kind of upset about the fact that she made that choice without telling him. But what he basically says is like, there's a world out there, there's a dark and a cruel and a horrible world. And like, it's my job as the man on the wall to keep it at bay. I'm the only one that can keep this world safe. I'm the one that has to do these things, you know, so on and so forth. But it's this idea that like only he can protect the world, right? Only he can keep everything safe, right? He's the only guy capable of doing that. And that the reality of him is that there are two sides to Al Simmons. There's the family man Al Simmons, then there's just the murderous, flipping a switch, doing whatever you need to do and removing the emotion from the equation kind of guy. And so the result of this is that he begins to kind of lash out, you know, for a moment. When he looks at her, you know, she says he got this look, the look that people he's killed have probably seen on his face for the last time. What he does is he punches her in the gut and then basically forces her to miscarry. And that's the worst thing Al Simmons did, is he basically hit his wife, she miscarried, and he killed his own baby. And it's extreme, right? It's insane because it takes everything about Al Simmons that we knew and it totally flips it on its head, right? Totally changes everything up because he's no longer this guy who was just a really great guy in a bad situation. Al Simmons was a terrible human being. And that's one of these things where he doesn't believe any of what he's hearing. The whole idea behind Wanda was that when he went on his final mission where he ended up dying, of course, he didn't know that he was going to die, and neither did she. The intention was that when he came back, she was going to leave him. She was going to walk away. She was going to be like, we're done. Divorce him and then basically end up leaving. But such as it was, Al Simmons ended up being killed and then basically became Spawn, which kind of solved the equation for her. Finding Terry was exactly what she needed, right? She needed a great man. She needed a man that she could kind of expose the worst parts of herself to and then still be accepted, right? Not be rebuked. That's what she needed, was just a great man. And so following that, Al Simmons basically takes off and the mother of creation basically verifies all of this and says, this was all true. These are all memories that you suppressed. Everything that you heard from Wanda is true. I haven't manipulated reality. I haven't changed anything. I didn't trick you into hearing something that wasn't actually being said. That's true. Like, this is your history. This is your past. You're not the man you think you are. When you died, and then when you went to hell and you encountered Malboja, you chose to become a hellspawn because subconsciously you believed that you deserved to be punished for what it was that you'd done. That's why you chose to become Spawn. And so at the end of the day, when Spawn's like, well, then kill me, like kill me and let this be done, the response of the mother of creation is, no, this is your penance. This is the price you pay for the things that you've done. You have to redeem yourself now. You are basically just kind of out there. Spawn is more or less in purgatory now, right? That's kind of how he is. He's not really in hell, but he's not really in heaven. He has to redeem himself and prove that he's a good guy in order to be able to get into heaven, or whatever it is, the actual heaven that kind of exists out there, where those who are good people go when they die, presumably the realm of the mother of creation. We're not really sure, but basically the mother of creation tells Spawn, it's now time for you to go back home. And when Spawn asks where that is, the mother of creation says, you know where that is, right back down to the alleys again. It's amazing. Like, it's crazy. But this is the darkest thing that Spawn ever did. Spawn killed his own kid, right? He was so obsessed with the idea of the life that he saw for him, so I guess the life that he kind of went after, violence, death, destruction, that it consumed him in its entirety and basically cost him his life and the life of his child. So with that being said, guys, we're gonna bring this video to an end. If you are new here to Comments Explain, make sure you guys hit the sub button to become part of the Rob Corps. If you guys enjoyed this video, make sure you drop a like, and I will catch you all later. Peace.